Current Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani says if there is a sit-down, there will be limits. He voiced concerns about the probe to White House correspondent John Roberts.
What I'm concerned about, because I know how when you're in the middle of an investigation you can lose some objectivity, is are they objective about the president's interview? Meaning, do they have an open mind to the fact that he may be telling the truth and Comey may be lying? If they have an open mind to that, then this is something we would consider. If they don't, then given all of the irregularities in this investigation, we would be foolish to have him be interviewed.
And here are some stipulations for an interview.
What to you would be acceptable parameters for an interview?
2 hours.
And topics?
Questions in advance. Relevant topics, meaning Russia, which may not be relevant any longer. And then we'd want a commitment for them that they're going to decide before the end of the summer, so we don't have this drag on and further imperil the presidency and the nation.
Mr. Trump firing off on Twitter once again, quote, "There was no collusion. It is a hoax. And there is no obstruction of justice. That is a setup and that is a trap." All right, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Two things going on. We'll talk about the shakeup of the lawyers in a second. But in terms of this collision course, which it looks like we're on, we're either going to have this thing go all the way to the Supreme Court,
right,
or they're going to orchestrate some sort of controlled sit-down with Mueller, only 2 hours.
Yeah.
Do you think those are the stakes?
Yeah, I think that this is actually really smart, and it's quite reasonable. Nobody wants to go all the way and take it, drag it out, et cetera, in terms of that. I think it's Rudy Giuliani is actually putting some really good parameters and limits on it to say we want to cooperate, we want to talk, let's sit down, let's limit the time scope, and let's have a discussion ahead of time, sort of where they're meeting of the minds in terms of how it should be conducted, and then the president will cooperate and answer the questions. Now, that sounds quite reasonable, right? That's not something that a tweet's being fired off or this or that or any kind of thing back and forth. They want to answer those questions, and I think it was particularly important what he said. Rudy Giuliani said as long as they have an open mind to be able to listen to the president, having already jumped to a foregone conclusion that Comey is telling the truth, that the president is not, then they're willing to sit down. If
How do they
the case,
determine whether
critical.
Mueller has an open mind?
Well, Mueller should then reply back, I have an open mind. I gave away the answers to the test.
Okay. So, Dana, Ty Cobb's out, and he, I think, worked for about a year for the president, and he got all of the documents over to Mueller, and he set up all the interviews. And now they're bringing in this impeachment lawyer that was working for Bill Clinton. What signal does that send to you?
Well, he didn't just work for Bill Clinton. I know Emmett Flood very well because he worked in the Bush White House as well.
Right.
He was the deputy to Fred Fielding. I know a lot about how Emmett thinks. He's got a very wonderful, dry sense of humor. He's a very good lawyer. And we were having that U.S. attorney situation where the Democrats were demanding all of these documents from us. We were trying to produce them as fast as we could. And you could the same exact arguments that the Republicans are making today against the Justice Department for not releasing documents, it's the mirror image of what happened back in 2007 and 2008. So I think that Emmett is a much more assertive and aggressive type person. He knows special counsel law extremely well. I think that there is a feeling that the original team was too accommodating to the Mueller investigation, and I don't know what this will change. But I think that when Rudy Giuliani says that this would be a 2-hour interview and we'll have to see in the narrow scope, I think that's probably what Emmett Flood talked to them about. Apparently, Jay Sekulow was the one who did a lot of the interviewing with Emmett to get to this point. But I also think that we kind of forget it was about 5 weeks ago that Don McGahn, the president's White House counsel, said that he'd like to be gone by the summer, that he would stay till he found his replacement, and that could extend to the midterms. But Emmett Flood, I think, will end up being the White House counsel before the end of the summer.
All right. And, Greg, what we're hearing from the White House is, I'm preparing to broker peace on the North Korea peninsula. I'm trying to negotiate something in Syria. I'm trying to deal with the Iranian nuclear situation. And now you're making me spend hours prepping for a sit-down and wasting my time on this.
Yeah, it's like studying for the SAT while you're trying to ride a bike. Anyway, we'll be right back. He should answer these questions on Twitter. Yeah. That's what he should do. And I mean, I think 2 hours is way too long. I don't think he should have given him any time. Just do it in writing somehow. What bothers me most about this is that the investigation, the media, and the Democrats all appear to be working in tandem. It's like I said yesterday, it's like the Iran deal. The Democrats push the message, the media spreads the message, the investigation broadens. It's a self-perpetuating echo chamber. And what is the echo in that chamber? Unseat and impeach, instead of a countervision to which requires ideas from Democrats provided to the media. They're relying on the ouster switch. We have to get rid of this guy, and this is the way to do it, which is disturbing. But to your point, we're in probably one of the most optimistic periods of recent history because we're watching the absence of ISIS videos. We're watching the absence of a North Korea nuclear threat. We're looking at a strong economy and declining crime overall, which is kind of interesting. So have they actually planned this out? They don't have to plan it out. They could just try to impeach the guy, but they should actually think about, in the long term, what does this mean to the country? What does it mean to half the country? What does it mean to the world? This is not just an attack on the United States. It's the world that's getting less violent. It's the world that's becoming safer because of a reduced North Korean threat and destruction of terrorist groups. It's about the world. Aren't we supposed to be thinking globally?
Yes.
Yes, Juan. Let's think globally.
Yes, think globally, Juan.
Think globally.
What do you think about all this?
Well, I think that, to me, it's a more aggressive phase. I think that's what Emmett Flood is. I think you're bringing in somebody who's a puncher and who knows how to fight. The thing is, I think it's Jay Sekulow who was taking the lead here and saying to Ty Cobb, I think that it's time to go. And I think you've seen the same thing with John Dowd. Both of them kind of were of a mind that said, the president, if you can talk, let's talk, but we don't think it's a great idea and we counsel you against it. The president wasn't listening. But after his lawyer, Michael Cohen's office was raided, I think the president has felt more defensive about giving the interview. And so now you're starting to see people who have gone from the litigation phase, I think, from the discovery phase, I should say, to litigation and now to confrontation. So the temperature has ramped up big time in the last few hours. And I think what's also contributed to the temperature rising is Rod Rosenstein over at Justice saying that you have people in the House who are trying to intimidate him and engage in what he called extortion.
And we have some of that sound, so let's hear Rod Rosenstein in his own words.
Rod.
There have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law, and any kind of threats that anybody makes are not going to affect the way we do our job.
So one of the reasons the House Oversight Committee is so frustrated with the Department of Justice, they've asked about Peter Strzok. They've asked about the Hillary investigation. They've asked about Uranium One. They've asked about FISA abuse. And they've been stonewalled for months and months and months and months and months by Rod Rosenstein and the FBI. And there's a real level of frustration that's reaching critical mass there.
Can I just interrupt for a second and say, wait a minute, Rod Rosenstein, not only did he help them justify firing Comey, he gave them the Comey memos that they requested. So what do you mean stonewall?
Well, they've asked about Peter Strzok and why he was fired and why it was 6 months before he was demoted, and that was hidden. They've asked about Uranium One, have gotten no answers. They've asked to see the dossier and the FISA application. What do you mean it's not to the topic?
This is in the weeds.
That's not in the weeds. That's what began a lot of these investigations.
No, I tell you what it is. It's an effort by Trump acolytes to try to undermine the standing of the Justice Department, the FBI, and that is a tragedy. Talk about thinking in the best interest of our country. That's not in the best interest.
Well, I would argue that, Juan, that if the Mueller investigation is looking at Russia collusion, he hasn't asked for a server from the DNC. He hasn't asked for Podesta's server. He hasn't asked anything about the payments made to Christopher Steele, and then those payments were hidden. So I think there's a lot of collusion on the other side. If he wants to look into that, he can, Kimberly.
Yeah, obviously there's some, frustration here. But I actually think that today, in terms of the comments by Rudy Giuliani, that there's a real, a sense of, calm and a practical approach. I mean, as a lawyer, foreign prosecutor, that's what you do. You say, okay, no problem, let's go over this. What is going to be good for you? And I think it makes the president look good to show that he has a reasonable person trying to, in fact, work and cooperate with the other side. Because the president's position has been, there is no collusion, and I did not obstruct, and I haven't done anything wrong. I'm frustrated by this. Okay, well, therefore, both sides are going to sit down and talk. You can't just put the president of the United States in with unfettered questions with no time frame or no, end game, et cetera. That would be ridiculous. No lawyer would do that. So Rudy Giuliani has a lot of experience in this. He has a team that he feels comfortable working with. That is also very important. And I think that that this is a good sign. I think it's positive.
Do you think the president is confident enough in his own abilities, Dana, to think he could go toe-to-toe with Mueller for 2 to 3 to 4 hours and answer everything?
Well, I mean, they're trying to get into his mind to see like what his intent was. I don't pretend to even be able to do that. But I would say I do think that the president does have should have some confidence in Rod Rosenstein, because what he was doing is saying, I'm sticking up for the executive branch and the Justice Department. And he's a good public servant, and the president chose a good person there, even though they might be frustrated that this investigation is going on. I think obviously Rod Rosenstein has the country's best interests in mind, and he has done well by the president doing the initial firing in the first place with the memo that he wrote. So I think that what's happening is our founding fathers knew about this a long time ago. That we're going to have 3 branches of government, and they're equal branches, and they're going to have to fight it out. And that's what we just see this over and over again in every administration. It's actually quite comforting.
And they sure are fighting it out at every single level.
Yes.
Well, we know whose side the media is on. I think the public knows that this stinks, that this is ultimately going to be a huge waste of time. If you don't think the media is involved in this, Stormy's lawyer has been on CNN 60 times in 3 months. He's on the network more than James Earl Jones's Voice. They should change the name of CNN to the Playboy Channel.
Okay.
Before you go, let me just say one thing in terms of ratcheting it up.
Yes.
I think now we come down to the question, if the president's lawyers say no to the possibility of testifying, then the subpoena comes, and then you get to the point of it goes to the Supreme Court or the president pleading the Fifth. And if that's the case, we are in, Greg, explosive territory.
You hope. You hope. You can still dream. You want the president to be impeached.
All right.